Once upon a time, not very far away from your town, in a cosy brick house, there lived 3 little pigs. They felt safe and happy in their sturdy home, especially as they knew they had seen off the big bad wolf, and he would bother them no longer. And with Christmas just around the corner, they were bustling with excitement as they readied themselves and their home to celebrate their favourite time of the year together. Each little pig had their own special job to prepare for the festivities. The first pig, who loved to play and have fun, made the games and activities they would play on the big day: Pin the Tail on the Wolf, Dizzy Piggy, and Woodland Whispers. The second pig, who liked to make things beautiful, decorated the house with holly and ivy, twinkling lights, paper snowflakes, and a huge Christmas tree overflowing with tinkling bells, shiny baubles, and sparkling tinsel. The third pig, who was very clever, was in charge of the food. Making a festive feast is pretty tricky, and it takes a lot of concentrating and skill, so he was the perfect pig for the job. He made buttery roasted parsnips and creamy cauliflower cheese, sweet nutty stuffing and crisp roast potatoes. And for pudding, he made a sumptuous cherry pie and custard. Everything looked delicious. But as they were busy with their preparations, the pigs couldn't help but feel that something was missing. Just as they were pondering this, there was a loud knock on the door. The pigs jumped and looked at each other, unsure who would be visiting them on Christmas Day. The first pig peered through the window and gasped. "It's a fox!" he squeaked, trembling a little. The other pigs exchanged worried glances. The fox stood on the doorstep, shivering and cold, looking hungry and lonely, and the pigs straight away felt sorry for him. After all, it was Christmas, a time of year to be open and generous, and they were sure the fox felt the same, so they opened the door. Come in, the pigs cried. Inside, the fox was ushered over to the fire and given a cup of hot cocoa and a blanket. They bustled around him, trying to help him feel warm and comfortable and involving him in their Christmas traditions. As the fox warmed up, he became quite chatty, and the pigs were pleased to see that he wanted to get involved in the preparations. He tried to help the first pig with getting the games ready, but he found it quite tricky to understand all the rules, and he kept saying things like, "These games don't look very fun. Can't we play Chase the Chase the Mouse?" It was a bit annoying, as the first pig had spent so much time preparing, so he suggested that the fox help with the decorating. The fox tried helping the second pig to hang a string of lights over the fireplace, but he kept getting tangled up. He said, "All these decorations are a bit over the top, aren't they? We usually just go out hunting, go for a lovely walk and then come home for supper." This sort of comment wasn't really that helpful, so the second pig suggested that the fox help in the kitchen. The fox tried to help the third pig with buttering the parsnips, but he kept doing it a bit too roughly, and the parsnips were turning to mush. "Is this all we're having?" the fox said, wrinkling up his nose. "Well, what do you usually have?" the third pig inquired, a little irritated. The fox thought for a moment. "Sometimes we have rabbit," he said, putting the butter knife down on the table. "Sometimes we have pheasant," he said, wiping his fingers clean. "But our favourite thing to have for Christmas dinner," he said as he licked his lips, "is pig." He leapt over the table towards the pigs, and they squealed and ran through the front door and out into the snowy night. The woods were empty. All the other creatures were at home celebrating with their families, so there was no one there to help as the pigs ran through the night, the fox snapping at their heels. Suddenly, there wasn't just one fox, not 2, but a whole family of foxes chasing the pigs. This had been their plan from the start. The pigs ran and ran, jumping over fallen logs and scraping through brambles, and they were starting to get tired, starting to slow down. Suddenly, they heard a howl, and then, there in front of them was the big, bad wolf, snarling and snapping his jaws. The pigs were terrified, but not as terrified as the foxes. They were enemies of the wolf and had been for generations. The foxes turned tail and scampered back into the woods, whimpering. The pigs were frozen in place, trembling at the new danger before them. But the wolf stopped snarling, sat down, and smiled nervously at them. "Hello, pigs," he said gently. The pigs said nothing. They had been fooled already tonight, and they wouldn't allow it to happen again. "I understand that it might be hard to trust me after everything that happened," the wolf said. "You know, all that huffing and puffing business." He looked a little embarrassed. "Well, I mean to make amends. I was actually on my way to your very nice house now to give you these." He held open his sack, and inside were delicately wrapped Christmas presents addressed to the pigs. "For us?" the pigs said. "For you," the wolf confirmed. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I regret how I treated you all. It's no wonder I've never really had any friends when that's how I used to behave. And, well, Christmas is just such a terrible time to be lonely." He offered them a small, hopeful smile. The pigs looked at each other.
What?
They finally realised what was missing from their Christmas. They had been having such a wonderful time together, but deep down, they knew that the wolf was out in the woods, cold and alone, and they simply couldn't enjoy Christmas because of it. "Come on," the pigs said. "You better come home with us." "Really?" the wolf said, his ears pricking up in surprise. "After everything?" "Yep," the pig said. "After all, Christmas is a time for eating, drinking, games, presents and fun. But it's also a time for kindness, for generosity and for forgiveness. So that's what we'll do. Let's go." The wolf followed them home through the woods, chatting and laughing all the way. As they entered the cosy little brick house, he was instantly warmed by the fire. But he also felt warm in his heart too, because he knew he had 3 new friends and his old life was far behind him. He gave the pigs their presents: a banjo for the pig who loved to play and have fun, brightly coloured paints for the pig who loved beautiful things, and a library card for the clever pig so he could read all the books he wanted and would never have to stop learning. The pigs were delighted. The wolf enjoyed the delicious supper and all the games, and the pigs decided that as their special guest, and because he was the tallest, he could put the star at the top of the tree. At the end of the evening, they all hugged the wolf, and he thanked them for their kindness. They invited him back the next year and all the years after that, and he gratefully accepted, knowing that they would now be lifelong friends. The end. And Merry Christmas. There are many stories about the big bad wolf. Many tales of his sly schemes, of his dastardly deeds, and his preposterous plots. They are told all around the world, in every culture, in every language, for centuries past. But I wonder if you've ever heard this one before. This story takes place at Christmas time, when the forest animals were busy decorating their homes and preparing for the festivities. Bright lights twinkled in the trees, and the forest hummed with joy. But the wolf's den, hidden away in the darkest part of the forest, was cold, empty, and quiet. No lights twinkled over his door. The wolf huddled alone in his den, staring out at the snowy woods. "I hate Christmas," he muttered. Everywhere the wolf went, he saw animals enjoying themselves. The squirrels had strung up shiny ribbons in the trees, and the rabbits were building snowmen in the meadow. The wolf huffed to himself. How ridiculous. On Christmas Eve, the wolf was prowling near the edge of the forest when something strange caught his eye. A flash of red and white hurtled through the sky. The wolf squinted. Surely not, he thought to himself with a sneer. His eyes tracked the red and white blur as it came careening down to the ground with a crash that echoed throughout the forest. A prickle of panic rose up in the wolf, but he squashed it back down and shrugged it off. He didn't care, he told himself. But he found that he couldn't quite bring himself to go home without having a quick check, so he started through the trees to investigate. The wolf's heart skipped a beat. He had heard stories about Santa Claus, but had never believed they could really be true. But there, just as surely as he stood there himself, was the sleigh, the reindeer, and the very real Santa Claus right there before him. He looked unharmed and the sleigh seemed to be in good working order, so the wolf turned and started to head back to his den.
Ho, ho, ho,
Santa boomed heartily to no one in particular.
I seem to have had a little mishap. Not to worry, still plenty of time to deliver all the presents to the good little boys and girls.
What nonsense, thought the wolf, ignoring him. But as he walked away, he felt a tiny twinge of regret. It might have been nice to meet the real Santa, but the wolf knew for certain he was on the naughty list and felt sure that Santa wouldn't want to meet him. He trudged a few steps more, and just as he was almost out of earshot, he heard Santa once more.
Oh no,
Santa said, his voice laced with dread. The wolf stopped. He turned and saw Santa Claus looking in his magical sack, rummaging around in it, turning it upside down and shaking it. It was empty. The wolf was torn. Santa clearly needed help, but would he accept it from someone on the naughty list? Gathering his courage, the wolf stepped out from behind the tree and cleared his throat. Santa turned around, seemingly surprised to see the big bad wolf standing there. But then Santa's rosy face broke into a huge, warm smile.
Well, well, Santa said. What can I do for you?
The wolf tried hard to look like his heart wasn't doing backflips, and he said calmly, Well, you looked like you needed some help, and it doesn't look like there's anyone else around, so, I'm here. Santa sighed, his jolly expression dimming slightly.
Yes, my sack of presents is empty. It was full when I left the North Pole, but now they're gone. Without those presents, I won't be able to deliver gifts to all the children and animals tonight.
The wolf shifted awkwardly. Perhaps I could help you find them, he offered. Santa's eyes twinkled. You want to help? I know I haven't been very good in the past, the wolf admitted, but maybe I'd like to try. Santa's warm smile returned.
Well, Wolf, I'd be glad to have your help. Christmas is about kindness and giving after all.
The wolf nodded, a warm and fuzzy feeling creeping into his chest. I think I know who might have taken your presents. Using his sharp nose, the wolf sniffed the air. There was a familiar scent of mischief in the wind, one he had smelled before. Follow me, he said, leading Santa through the snow-covered forest. The two of them walked past tall pine trees and frozen streams until they reached a dark, twisted part of the woods. The wolf pointed to a large hollow log. Trolls. They're always playing pranks. I bet they swiped your presents. Santa nodded thoughtfully.
Ah, I've heard of them.
Let's find out. Quietly, Santa and the wolf approached the log. Peering inside, they saw a group of tiny, mischievous trolls huddled around a pile of presents. They were giggling as they played with the ribbons and bows. Santa stepped forward.
Ahem.
The trolls jumped, startled to see him, and indeed the big bad wolf. They looked at the presents, then back at Santa. One of them let out a tiny whimper.
What are you doing with my gifts? Santa asked, kindly but firmly.
The trolls looked at each other sheepishly. Santa sighed gently.
I understand you wanted to join in the fun, but taking things that don't belong to you isn't the way to do it. Christmas is about giving and sharing, not just receiving.
The trolls looked down, squeaking ashamedly. Their leader scuffed his foot on the ground. The big bad wolf, who had been quietly watching, suddenly spoke up. Why don't we make a deal? He suggested. You trolls can help bring the presents back to the sleigh. That way you'll be part of the Christmas magic, and it might make up for taking the gifts. The trolls perked up at the idea and chirped hopefully. Great idea, Wolfie, Santa said with a wink. And so, as Santa, the wolf and the trolls loaded the presents back into Santa's sleigh, the wolf felt the warm spark in his heart spread to the tips of his fingers and right down to his toes. Maybe Christmas wasn't that bad after all. And maybe, just maybe, neither was he. Once the sleigh was loaded, Santa turned to the wolf. Wolfie, how would you like to join me for the rest of the deliveries? The wolf's eyes widened. You mean, ride with you in the sleigh? Santa chuckled. Of course.
After all, you've shown me that you understand the true spirit of Christmas. Who better to help?"
With excitement, the wolf climbed into the sleigh beside Santa. The trolls jumped about and waved them off as Santa took the reins. With a jingle of bells, the sleigh roared into the sky, leaving the forest far below. Throughout the night, Santa and the wolf worked side by side, delivering gifts to all the good children and animals. By the time dawn arrived, they had delivered every single present. Santa guided the sleigh back to the clearing where they had first met. He smiled as he climbed down.
"Thank you, Wolfie," Santa said warmly. "I knew you wouldn't let me down."
The wolf was confused for a moment. "You knew? What do you mean, you knew?" Santa looked a little sheepish and said,
"Well, maybe it wasn't such a coincidence that I crashed in this particular part of the forest. It seemed to me that this Christmas, more than anything, you needed a friend."
The wolf looked at him in amazement. "Thank you," he said. Santa shook him warmly by the paw.
"I'd better get back to the North Pole," he said.
The wolf turned to head back to his den.
"One more thing," Santa said.
He reached into his sack and handed the wolf a small package.
"This is for you," Santa said, with a twinkle in his eye. "You're officially off the naughty list."
The wolf carefully unwrapped the gift. Inside was a soft, cosy scarf and a shiny bell that jingled softly when he shook it. "Merry Christmas, Santa," the wolf whispered, a tear in his eye. With a final jingle of bells, Santa's sleigh disappeared into the morning sky, leaving the wolf standing in the snow, filled with the joy of Christmas. The end. A Merry Christmas. Once upon a time, there was a wealthy merchant who lived with his 3 daughters. The eldest 2 were as vain as they were fussy. They were never satisfied with what they had, always demanding fancy new dresses, sparkling jewellery, and enough perfume to make a skunk faint. But the youngest daughter, who everyone called Beauty, was the opposite. Beauty didn't need jewels or fine clothes to be happy. Give her a good book and a sunny spot to read, and she was in heaven. The merchant adored all his daughters, but secretly, Beauty was his favourite. She was kind, hard-working, and never complained, unlike her sisters, who thought chores were some kind of punishment invented to ruin their lives. One day, the merchant got some terrible news. His ships, loaded with the valuable goods he was to sell, had sunk in a storm. He'd lost everything. The family had to sell their fancy house in town and move to a little cottage in the countryside. But Beauty didn't mind. She rolled up her sleeves and got to work tending the garden and milking the goats. Her sisters, on the other hand, spent most of their time whining and staring at themselves in the mirror. Months passed, and just as the family began to get used to their situation, the merchant got a letter. One of his ships had survived. "I must go to the city and see if I can sell the cargo," the merchant told his daughters. "Perhaps we can return to our old life." The sisters immediately started listing all the things they wanted: silk dresses, diamond rings, and fancy hats. Beauty simply said, "Bring me a single rose, father. That's all I want." On his way home from the city, the merchant was caught in a terrible storm and had no choice but to shelter in an ominous-looking castle, covered in spiked turrets and gargoyles. The castle was strange, to say the least. The looming wooden doors creaked open as if by magic at his approach, and the table inside was set with a magnificent feast, though no matter how much he called out, no one seemed to be around. "Hello?" the merchant called again and again. Silence. Shrugging, he decided not to waste a good meal. He ate, rested, and prepared to leave the next morning. At sunrise, the merchant snuck back out of the castle, and on his way out, he walked through a rose garden, and in the centre, on a small bush, he saw the most perfect rose that had ever existed. Remembering Beauty's request, he reached out and plucked it from the bush. A fearsome roar boomed through the garden. Thundering from the castle on clawed feet appeared a beast, a massive, fur-covered creature with piercing blue eyes. "How dare you steal from me?" the beast growled. The merchant dropped the rose, trembling. I'm sorry, I meant no harm. It was for my daughter." The beast glared at him. "Then she will take your place." The merchant begged and pleaded. He said he would stay and there was no need for Beauty to come to this terrible place. But the Beast would not budge. The merchant would have no choice in the end, because Beauty was so desperately worried about her father that she went out looking for him, and she was caught in a storm and took shelter in the castle. The merchant tried to tell her to leave before the Beast saw her, but it was no use. The Beast told the merchant to go home and care for his other daughters, and the merchant simply could not refuse. And so, Beauty stayed. Beauty expected the Beast to be, well, terrifying, but he surprised her. He certainly looked very scary, with his sharp teeth and growly voice, but he didn't harm her. Instead, he gave her her own room, a wardrobe full of lovely clothes, and a library so big it made her gasp. "I hope you'll be comfortable here," the Beast said one evening, his voice softer than she'd expected. "Thank you," Beauty replied, still wary. Over time, Beauty started to see past the Beast's frightening appearance. He was kind, thoughtful, and even funny in a gruff, awkward sort of way. She noticed how warm he was with his staff in the castle, and how much they appeared to love him, despite his sometimes grisly demeanour. Every evening they dined together, and every evening the Beast would ask, "Beauty, will you marry me?" And every evening Beauty would smile politely and say, "I'm sorry, Beast, I can't." The Beast never got angry. He would just nod sadly and say, "I understand." One day, Beauty found the Beast looking gloomier than usual. "What's wrong?" she asked. "I can see you miss your family terribly," he said. "You should visit them. Take this magic ring. It will bring you back here when you're ready." Beauty was amazed. She never thought she would see them again, and she certainly didn't think the Beast would trust her enough to go home and then come back again. She thanked the Beast and used the ring to return home, despite a niggling feeling in her chest that pulled tighter and tighter the further she journeyed from the Beast. When she returned home, her family was overjoyed to see her, though her sisters were more interested in her fancy clothes than anything else. "How did you escape the Beast?" one sister asked. "It's not like that," Beauty said, not sure why she was so keen to defend the Beast. "He's not as bad as you think." The sisters exchanged a look. "She's really lost it," the other whispered. Days turned into weeks, and the tightness in Beauty's chest only grew. She finally realised that she desperately missed the Beast. One night, she woke with a start. She had dreamed of the Beast, that he was terribly ill, lying in the rose garden, weak. He looked as though he were dying. She jumped to her feet and packed her bag. "I have to go back," she declared, and rushed from the cottage. Using the magic ring, Beauty returned to the castle as fast as she could. Sure enough, she found the Beast collapsed in the garden, barely breathing. "I'm so sorry," she cried, kneeling beside him and stroking the fur on his face. "I should have come back sooner." The Beast opened his eyes. "I thought you didn't care," he whispered. Beauty felt like her heart would burst. How could he think such a thing? "I do care," Beauty said, tears streaming down her face. "I love you." The moment she said those words, a bright light surrounded the Beast. Beauty shielded her eyes, and when the light faded, the Beast was gone. In his place, a handsome prince was now laying in her arms. "What? What happened? Who are you?" Beauty stammered. The prince smiled. "You broke the curse. A wicked fairy turned me into a beast, and only true love could set me free." Beauty blinked. "Wait, you were the Beast?" "It's still me," he said gently, and Beauty looked deep into his blue eyes and saw it truly was her Beast. Now, her prince. "Well," she said with a small smile, "I guess you clean up pretty well." The prince asked Beauty to marry him one last time, and this time she said yes. The merchant and Beauty's sisters moved to the castle, and rather than staying spoilt and bossy, they rose to the challenge of becoming royals and found they could behave with grace and decorum after all. And it certainly helped that their brother-in-law, the prince, somehow retained his deep, grumbling growl. And they all lived happily ever after. The end. Once upon a time, in a faraway magical kingdom, there was a castle with golden turrets and lush green gardens. Inside lived a king and queen who had everything they could ever possibly want. Everything, that is, except a child. For years they hoped, prayed and crossed their fingers until one day their wish finally came true. A baby girl was born, and she was perfect in every way. The king and queen named her Aurora, which means dawn, because they thought she was as beautiful and full of hope as the sunrise. To celebrate her birth, they threw a huge party. Everyone was invited. Well, almost everyone. At the party, 12 good fairies arrived, each with a magical gift for the baby princess. One by one, they floated up to her cradle. "She will be kind," said one. "She will be wise," said another. "She will have the voice of an angel," said a third. This went on until Aurora's future was looking brighter than the palace chandeliers. But just before the 12th fairy was about to give her gift, the doors burst open. In crashed an uninvited guest, the 13th fairy, and she was not happy. "Really? A party? And no invitation for me?" she hissed, glaring at the king and queen. The queen tried to stammer out an apology, but the fairy wasn't having it. "Save it," she snapped. "You want to disrespect me? Fine, but you'll regret it." She marched up to Aurora's cradle, raised her wand, and said in a voice that sent shivers down everyone's spine, "When this child turns 16, she will prick her finger on a spinning wheel and die." The room gasped. The queen burst into tears. The king shouted for the guards, but the 13th fairy disappeared in a puff of smoke. The 12th fairy, who hadn't yet given her gift, stepped forward. "I can't undo the curse," she said sadly, "but I can soften it." She waved her wand over Aurora and said, "The princess will not die. Instead, she will fall into a deep sleep, one that will last 100 years, and she will only be awoken by true love's kiss." The king, determined to protect his daughter, ordered every spinning wheel in the kingdom to be smashed to bits and burned. He was so serious about it that even his own royal robes ended up a bit threadbare without new fabric being spun. Aurora grew up happy and healthy, with all the gifts the fairies had given her. She was kind, wise, graceful, and of course, so beautiful that flowers seemed to bloom brighter just because she walked by. But no one told Aurora about the curse. Why scare her, the king and queen thought. We've burned all the spinning wheels to ash. She's completely safe. Or so it seemed. On Aurora's 16th birthday, the castle was buzzing with excitement. There was going to be a feast, a ball, and a cake so big they had to bring it into the ballroom on a horse and cart. "Just don't go wandering," the queen warned Aurora. "Why not?" Aurora asked, curious. No reason. Just stay in your room and relax," the queen said, with a nervous laugh. Of course, telling someone not to wonder is the surest way to make them want to wonder. So as soon as the queen was distracted, Aurora slipped out of her room. She wandered through the castle, climbing stairs and opening doors she'd never noticed before, until she found herself in an old tower. At the top, she opened a creaky door and saw something strange. An old woman, sitting at a spinning wheel. "What are you doing?" Aurora asked. "Spinning thread, my dear," the old woman replied. Aurora tilted her head. "What's spinning?" "Come closer and I'll show you," the old woman said with a sly smile. Aurora reached out to touch the spindle and prick! The moment her finger touched the sharp point, she stumbled and fell to the ground, fast asleep. The old woman disappeared in a cloud of black smoke. It was the 13th fairy all along. When the king and queen found Aurora, they were devastated. As they lay her in her bed, the 12th fairy appeared. "The curse has taken hold," she said gently. "She will not wake for 100 years." With a wave of her wand, the fairy cast a new spell over the entire castle. Everyone inside, servants, cooks, knights, and even the royal pets, fell into a deep sleep. Outside, a thick wall of thorny bushes sprang up, completely surrounding the castle. It was so dense and so sharp that no one dared to go near it. Over time, people almost forgot about the castle entirely. It became a legend, a story that mothers told their children before bed to prevent them from going wandering alone. 100 years passed, and most people believed it was just a story. But one day, a young prince rode into the kingdom and overheard some villagers talking about the Sleeping Beauty. "A beautiful princess, asleep for 100 years?" the prince said, intrigued. "Where?" The villagers pointed toward the forest, but warned him, "The thorns are too thick. Many have tried to get through and none have returned." The prince, being the adventurous type, decided to try anyway. When the prince reached the wall of thorns, he drew his sword and began cutting his way through. But a strange thing happened. The thorns seemed to part for him, almost as if they knew he was supposed to be there. Finally, he reached the castle gates and stepped inside. The place was eerily quiet. Cobwebs covered the chandeliers and ivy crept up the walls. But as he explored, he found everyone just sleeping. The cooks slept with their heads rested on their rolling pins, the guards leaning on each other's shoulders, and the court jester still cradling the 3 apples he'd been juggling when the sleeping spell was cast. At last, the prince climbed a winding staircase and found a room at the very top of the tower. There, lying on a grand bed, was Aurora. Her hair shimmered like gold, and she looked so peaceful that the prince hesitated. "Is this really what I'm supposed to do?" he wondered aloud. "We know that you're only supposed to kiss people that definitely really want to be kissed, but this is a fairy tale, so we'll let it slide." He leaned down and gave her a very small, very gentle kiss on the cheek. Aurora's eyes fluttered open. She blinked up at the prince, confused. Who are you?" I just woke you up," he said awkwardly, and he explained as much as he knew about the legend. "Apparently, only true love's kiss would break the curse," he said shyly. "Well," Aurora said with a smile, "I suppose it's lovely to finally meet you." As soon as Aurora had awoken, the entire castle sprang to life. The cooks continued with their rolling pins, the guards started yawning, and the jester began juggling again. The king and queen were overjoyed to see their daughter awake, and the prince was invited to stay for the biggest party the castle had ever seen. Aurora and the prince got to know each other a little better and realised that, sure enough, it really was true love, and they were soon married. And so they all lived happily ever after. The end.